let's take a look at an automation scenario and set that up in our Security Center system. In this situation, we have a side entrance into one of the buildings, and we want to know if somebody is trying to get through the door who shouldn't have access to it. Also, we have a gate leading up to the building interior as well, so we want the same kind of response if someone gets too close to the gate. We have a line cross system set up for the gate, and we get events in Security Center from it. The first thing we'll need to do is go into our home page and start up an automation task. On top, let's make sure we're in the Automation section. Either use the Add an Entity button on the bottom of the task, or right-click in the list to create a new automation entity. Now that our automation has been created, it's waiting for a name, so we can just type it in right now, or we can do that from the Identity tab. We can also give it a brief description from here if the name isn't enough to tell us what it is doing. We can also create folders here to organize our automations by type, location, or any other sorting method we want to use. Our automation entities can be dragged and dropped into these folders the same way we manage our entities in the area view. Now that it's been created and we've given it a name, let's go over to the Properties tab. There are 3 ways we can have an automation activated: manually, on a set schedule, or by a Security Center event. A new automation will be set to trigger manually, which means that a user who has the appropriate privileges can execute this automation from a map object or from a hot action, or it can be triggered by another automation entity. In another video, we'll take a quick look at the privileges a user would need to trigger automations. We can also have this automation trigger on a particular schedule. We don't have to set up a schedule entity for this, we can just define it within the automation's properties, much like we do with a schedule task. In fact, if you look at the recurrence options, they're the same ones we have for a scheduled task and behave in the same way. Note that the entity icon will update if you change the trigger type and apply the change, so we can easily see from the list which trigger option is expected. In our scenario, we're looking for different events to trigger the automation, so we need to change the trigger type to Event. In the Triggers section, we can add multiple events that Security Center will look for. If these events happen in the order we've configured here, the response actions will be executed. We can tell Security Center to look for any event we have listed here, or look for all of the events. We can also tell Security Center how many times the event must happen before it can be counted as completed. If we click on the Followed By button, we can configure an event that has to happen only after the previous set of events have been completed. Let's add our first triggering event. This is if someone who is not an employee is denied entry at the side door reader. Under When, we would choose Access Denied as the event. Just in case it was a bad card read, let's look for this to happen twice. We just need to click on the Occurs Once link and bump the number up to 2. Once we have an event selected, we can choose a source or leave it set to any related entity. If we want to choose a specific door to see the event from, we can click on the Source menu and change it to Specific Entity. This is only for the side door, so we can choose the side entrance door from the pop-up window. If we wanted to choose a set of doors, like if we had multiple side entrances, we can use the Control and Shift keys to select multiple entities from this list. To add more entities later on, we can click on the Add an Item button to select other entities. Some events also contain additional information or metadata that we can use. If we see an Add Condition button, we can filter out events using this metadata. In our example, we're not just looking for someone getting an Access Denied event at the door, they also have to be someone other than an employee. So we can click on the Add Condition button and filter it on the cardholder. Now we have a condition that the cardholder has to be in the list of cardholders and cardholder groups we select here. But wait, we're looking for anyone but the employees, so we'd have to select all those other groups and add them to this list. That might take a while, so what we'll do instead is change the In connector to Not In and select the employee's cardholder group. If we wanted to also look at the credential, we could add another condition here. In case the security team decides they want this automation to run for any access denied later on, we can also click on the X on the right to get rid of the condition or source. We also want this automation to run if we get a side gate line cross custom event, which would be from the gate sensor. To set that up, we would just click on the Add Trigger button and select that event in the When field. This is an event we set up to be triggered from a zone, so we'll choose our SideGate virtual zone as the specific source here. Note the connector next to the new event. We're telling Security Center to look for the Access Denied events or the SideGate line cross event. If we only wanted Security Center to count this trigger list as complete if it sees both sets of events, we can choose the drop-down menu on top and change it from Any Event to All Events. That changes the connector to an AND next to our SideGate line cross event. We also have a timer on top to limit how long these events have to be completed. If we get an access denied on the side entrance door, but the next one is in a half an hour, it's most likely not related to the first one. To make sure they are related, let's change this to 5 minutes. If we have an intruder, they're most likely not going to stick around longer than that if they can't get in. If we wanted to make sure the intruder actually got in, we could look for motion from one of the cameras inside. To do that, we can click on the Followed By, Add a Motion On event, and choose the camera. Just like we saw with the Access Denied and the SideGate line cross events, we can configure a set of events where we're looking for any or all events and within a set time. In our particular example, we don't have a camera set up in the area yet, so we'll get rid of this second event set. Now that the triggers are set, we just need to add the response actions. These can be any of the actions in the system. The whole list is there. In our scenario here, how would we want the system to help us deal with this suspicious person? First of all, let's make the video easier to find later on, so we'll ask the system to add a bookmark. If the automation was triggered because of an event coming from a camera, we could use that source as the camera we're adding the bookmark to. In our case, we're looking for a door event or a custom event, so we'll need to flip this over to Specific and choose the side entrance camera. Note that we have the More button next to it in case we want to add the bookmark to more than one camera. Below that, we'll have to type a message like we normally would when creating a bookmark. However, we have a button on the side where we can add fields to the message, so it can contain relevant information pulled from the automation triggers. Anything in curly brackets like this is a field and will be replaced. It just drops the info right in there, so make sure you have the spacing taken care of. Now that we have a bookmark to go back and find later, let's also flag our security team to see this by sending a message. We'll need to set the recipients to the right team, fill in the message text that we want to show them, like suspicious person at the side door, and set the timeout values. Is that enough? Well, I happen to know that there's a light attached to the camera, so let's see if we can scare them off with it. We can add a trigger output action, choose the output relay that the light is connected to, and choose the output behavior. I've previously set one up that goes active and inactive every second, but this is a security operation, not a rave, so let's just choose the active behavior. And there we go, lots of ways Security Center can help us respond to a suspicious person at the side door. We're pretty much done with the Properties tab, so let's take a look at the Advanced tab to see what else we can do with our automation. We can have multiple Automation Manager roles running on different servers in the system, so the first field on top here is to specify which one this automation belongs to. The information note here is just a reminder that the server the role is running on will be used for the time when we're looking at dates and schedules. The next field is who we want the automation executed as. This doesn't mean the user has to be logged in, but it can be used for tracking purposes and privilege restrictions on the response actions. This type of automated response may not be something that's useful or necessary all the time, so we have some timing options here as well. Maybe the building is being used to temporarily store a famous art collection. Very nice. In that case, we can switch on the activation and expiration date fields and set it for when the art collection arrives and when it's being moved out. We can also set up schedules to dictate when the automation can be triggered. If one of the trigger events happens outside of this time, the response will not be executed. This also applies to automations set to run manually. The exception schedule can be used to override the active schedule and set the automation to be inactive during those dates and times, such as holidays. Below that, we have a reactivation threshold we can set, so we don't have the automation running too often. We can either say that the whole automation can't be run again until the timer expires, or we can do this on a per-source basis. For example, we may want to send an email if any camera in our list of critical cameras drops offline. In case this is a network issue and the camera comes back and drops again several times, we can put a reactivation threshold of 30 minutes. However, if there are multiple cameras in this list, and 2 of them drop within minutes of each other, we still want an email for each camera drop. That's when we'd set the reactivation threshold to be per source entity. The last checkbox there is to say if we want to keep the activity trails for this particular automation, which can be good for troubleshooting purposes. This will take up database space, so we normally wouldn't want to keep this option checked for all our automations all the time. Alright, we'll need to make sure we've applied our changes, and the last step will be to activate this automation. We can do that by right-clicking on the automation and choosing the Activate option, or by clicking on the Activate button on the bottom with our automation entity selected. We also have handy buttons on the bottom to duplicate an automation, run an automation, diagnose any problems with the automation, or pull up an audit trails report with this automation selected. The last 2 options are under the Maintenance menu, but we can also perform all of these functions by right-clicking on the automation. We can now go into our Map Designer task and add them to any relevant maps.